So we're going to go ahead to learn about variables. So variables are simply how we store an information we want to use later on in the file. To create a variable in JavaScript, there are a few ways you could do that. The first one I'm going to be covering, it's using a keyword called let. So I could say let year equal to 2021. And then I'll just end up with a semicolon, and then I could say console.log. So somewhere else in my file now, I can make reference to that variable which I created, which is called year. So year now has a value of 2021. So if I console log year, I should see 2021 as a value. Cool. Now I might decide at a particular time that I want to override this year. Okay, I can do that by simply saying year equal to, and then I add the new value I want. Now I didn't have to put let anymore. I just used the name of the variable because I have declared it earlier. Now for you to use a variable, for you to make reference to a variable, you must have declared it beforehand, like we did on line number 1. And to declare a variable or to create a variable, you use let. That's one of the ways you use let. Let is a keyword, and then year is the name of the variable which we chose. We could have used something else as a name, and then the value equal to the value. So I'm just going to go ahead and say console.log. I'll say the same year. Now what this is going to do is that it's going to assign, we're going to create a variable year and assign 2021 to it. And then we can see that on line number 3. And then it's going to override that value on line number 5. And then we're going to see the new value. So let's run that. And you can see we have 2021. And then we have 2020. Cool. Now there is another way of declaring variables, of creating variables. Now that's by using another keyword called const. So I can say const, let me say amount equal to 5,000. And now I'll console log this amount just to see it in the console. When we save, you can see that 5,000. Now you might ask, what is the difference between the const and let? I'm going to show you the difference now. Now, peradventure, I want to override the value of amount like I did for the value of year. And I say amount, I say equal to, let's make it 6,000 now. And let's just console log that value amount. Now I'm going to get an error, and the error says assignment to constant variable. Now the keyword const creates a variable, alright, it does create a variable, but the variable cannot be overwritten. Okay, we cannot change the value of that variable. So I like to think of variables like a box. So we've created a box, we open the box, and then we'll put in a value. Now when you create that box or variable using const, that box cannot be opened anymore. Okay, although we can see through the box to see what the value is, maybe it's a glass box, but we can't override what's inside that box. So a general rule would be that whenever you want to create a variable that you might change later on in your code, then you should use the keyword let. And when you want to create a variable that you're sure you're not going to change this, you're not going to change the value of the variable, then you should use const. Now you might be wondering why this? Well, when you start using JavaScript, you actually begin to realize that this is actually a good thing and not a bad one. Because you might want to create a variable and you don't want that variable to change. And you don't want a situation whereby somewhere along the line of your code or somewhere down your code, that variable gets updated. So you might not want that. And because you cannot possibly keep track of everything, maybe someone else's code, and then that const, this keyword const, is going to help you out to make sure that that variable doesn't get updated or changed. So you can use let when you want something to actually change, so you're being deliberate about it. Now, these two keywords, const and let, are actually new keywords introduced to JavaScript. Before we had let and const, there was another way, an older way of declaring your variables. And I'm just going to show you what it is. We use the keyword called var. So I can say var and let's just say price equal to, let's see, I'll go with 3000, and then let's console log what price is. Okay, so I'm just gonna get rid of this error. We have an error on line 13 where we try to update the const variable. So I'm gonna get rid of that so that we can proceed to the other parts of the code. Okay, now you can see 3000, we printed 3000. Now with var is like a combination of let and const. Before it was before let and const anyway. So you can as well go ahead and update a var variable. So I can say price is now 10,000, and I just console log the price again just to see that value updated. Now we can update var just like how let works, but with the introduction of let and const, we can now use const to, say we don't ever want to update this value. We don't use the value, but we don't update it. So that's the advantage of that. Now, before we proceed, I just want to run through the rules of declaring variables. So one of the first rules about variables is that you cannot start your variable name with a number. I'm going to show you an example. So I'm just going to have let here, like we did before. But this time I'm going to try and put a number in front of that. So this is wrong. You can start a variable name with a number, and you can see I already have a squiggly line here. So let's say if I try to console log this, just open up my console, you can see it says invalid unexpected token. So there's an error somewhere. So we cannot do this. You can actually start with a letter and then continue with a number if you want, but you cannot start with a number. You can also decide to start with $. That is just fine. So let's just put this here and save. That gives us our value. So you can start with $. You can start with characters, but you cannot start with number. That is one of the first rules. Then another rule is that you cannot have spaces in the name of your variable. For example, I can say year of birth. I can't do this. Okay, we have spaces here. Now what I could do is to replace the spaces with an underscore. Okay, you can have underscore. This is fine. This is gonna work. Or better still, you can type in camel case. Now camel case is where you have the first letter of the first word starts in small letter, and every other subsequent word starts with a capital letter. So I can say year of, O it's going to be capital letter, then B is going to be capital letter. So this is typing in camel case. So this is preferred rather than using space. Space is not going to work. It's going to give an error. So that is the second rule about variables. Now another rule about variable is they cannot use some words, some reserved words. There are some words that have been reserved. For example, you cannot name your variable let. Let already is a reserved word. And you can't also name your variable const. So I can say let. So another rule about variable is that I cannot use reserved words. So there are some words that have been reserved by JavaScript to help it run. For example, I cannot say let const. Const is a reserved word. So you can see that's already given me a squiggly line. So we can use reserved words. And there's so many reserved words out there. You can take your time, Google them to make sure that you don't get to use them. But one of the rules I try to stick with that I don't really have to bother about is a reserved word or not, is that I name my variables as close as possible to what it's going to do, okay, or the value it contains. For example, if I want to say year of birth, it's very unlikely that I'm going to have a reserved word called year of birth. Year of birth is more like a phrase, okay, so I'm kind of like covered. So if you're naming your variables, I recommend you use words or phrases that are close to what you're going to store with that variable or what you're going to use it for. That way it's easy to read, and it's also easy for, let's say you're working in a team, for your team members to also go through your code. Now, other thing I just want to show you is how to use comments. Now, comments is just a way of leaving some guides for you along your code. Comments do not actually do anything to the actual code. They are just for you, the programmer, or whoever is going to be reading your code. For example, I could add a comment on line number 2 that says, show year of birth in console. Now, the way we add a single line comment in JavaScript is by using // You can see that here. So this line number 2 that says show year of birth in console is actually not going to do anything. I can actually save and we still have the same code. So it doesn't cause any change. This is just a way for we programmers to able to, kind of like know what we're doing when we come back to this code to read it again, or when someone else is going through our code. So comments are a good way of leaving those guides there. Now, there's a quick way of doing that in VS Code. Let me just get rid of the /. It's you can highlight what you want to make a comment, and you hold down the control key and the /. You can see that has turned into a comment. We can also do multiple line comments. So let's say I want to change multiple lines to comments. So I'll select the whole lines, hold down my control and /. That is going to, change every line to a comment. But there is a better way of doing multiple line comments. And that's, I think, Control-Shift-A or Control-Alt-A. I'm not sure. Let's see. Shift-Alt-A. So Shift-Alt-A, that will be a multiple line comment. So the multiple line comment starts with a / and an asterisk and ends with an asterisk and /. So I can have several content in between this, and they all are comments. So if I save, we're going to see nothing, even if I have multiple lines of gibberish per se. But so far as they're inside that comment block, it's not going to be visible, it's not going to affect anything in our code.